Well, good morning, everybody. Just to reintroduce myself, I'm Meg O'Hara from the Adult Ed Committee. And I want to highlight the start of next week's class, because sadly, this one is drawing to a close. Next week, it will be Dancing in the Darkness, which is a new adult ed class beginning May 7th. Led by Robert Crouch and Jeff Doan, and will be a discussion of the latest book by Otis Moss III, senior pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ. And participants are asked to get a copy of the book in advance to read along with the class, and this will be an in-person only class. So let's start in prayer. Please join me. Dear Lord in heaven, we are grateful for this opportunity to come together again this morning. Please be with us and open our minds as we seek to deepen our understanding of how to grow closer to you, even as we grow in years. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Betty.
You would expect visiting firemen to tell you how pleased they are to be here, but I really am. So let's begin as people of faith, not just any people, as First Peter says, by looking not only at the process of aging and its reality, but our faith resources to begin to engage in that process. So if you all would look at the first handout, I hope you all have one. If you don't, please raise your hand, called Aging Gracefully, Wisdom from Various Sources. We're going to start out from biblical sources. And I could tell from last week that everybody here, that I heard anyway, is a fine reader. So I'd like somebody to start us and speak up so the folks online can hear. Somebody from the Hebrew Bible, please read, and then somebody else from the New Testament. Who would start with the reading from the Hebrew Bible?
The righteous flourish. In old age, they still produce fruit. They are always green and full of sap.
Isn't that a verdant, earthy image, full of sap and green? And then from the New Testament, someone?
So we do not lose heart, even though our outer nature is wasting away. Our inner nature is being renewed day by day.
Amen. That is our hope and that is our faith. Moving on through Christian history, there was a wonderful saint, a contemplative from the 16th century, perhaps you know of and even have read her, St. Teresa of Avila, a great mystic from the ancient church. And a quote from her is at the bottom of that same page. Life smooths us. Who would read that one for us?
Well, life smooths us, perfects, as does the river the stone. And there is no place our beloved is not flowing, though the current's force you may not like.
Though the current's force you may not like. A more creative way to say life isn't always a bowl of cherries. The force we may not like. Echoing that is something from the Jewish tradition. Would you look at the page, the next to last page? Up at the top it says Jewish wisdom on aging well. And then there is one sentence, trenchant sentence, I think, not to have felt pain. Would someone read that for us? Yes, please.
How much is the whole page?
Just the first sentence. You get off easy, but it's good. Go.
Not to have felt pain is not to have been human.
So an affirmation of the fullness that our life experience brings. Continuing in the Jewish tradition, there is a Hasidic tale that Parker Palmer tells in his book On the Brink of Everything, kind of talking about his own aging process. Here is the Hasidic tale. A disciple asks the Rebbe, "Why does Torah tell us to place these words upon our hearts? Why does it not tell us to place these holy words in our hearts?" The Rebbe answers, "It is because as we are, our hearts are usually closed, and we cannot place the holy words in our hearts. And so we place them on top of our hearts, and there they stay until one day the heart breaks and the words fall in." Does that speak to you?
Very powerful.
As it does to me? Yeah. Palmer expands on that a little bit by saying what we all know already, and that is that heartbreak comes with what he calls the territory of being human. Love and trust fail us. What brought meaning at one time suddenly goes dry. Our experiences go on and on. We don't need all of his examples. He says, suffering can indeed break our hearts. But the thing is, then he says, hearts could break in one of two different ways. The first way is the heart that breaks apart into shreds and shards and leads to the diminishment of the one who suffers or who is diminished. It's a brittle heart that breaks apart. But he says that's not the only way that the heart can break, especially for people of faith. He says there's not only the brittle heart that breaks apart, there's also the suffering heart that breaks open. You see the difference. Heart breaks apart. The supple heart can break open to more compassion for others who have broken hearts, can break open to more of the fullness of life and light and love. I want to share an example of somebody who seems to have done that. And if you will turn in your handout to page 4, turn to the page 4. This is a perennial favorite, and perhaps a lot of you have seen it before, but it's so germane to what we're talking about now. The prayer of an anonymous abbess. Feel free to hear some of the quiet humor in it. Who would start out, and then I'll call on different people from time to time. Lord, thou knowest better. Go for it.
Lord, thou knowest better than myself that I am growing older and will soon be old. You want me to continue?
Please, I'll let
Keep
you.
me from becoming too talkative, and especially from the unfortunate habit of thinking that I must say something on every subject at every opportunity. Release me from the idea that I must straighten out other people's affairs. With my immense treasure of experience and wisdom, it seems a pity not to let somebody partake of it. But thou knowest, Lord, that in the end I will need a few friends.
Ah, great wisdom. Who would continue with keep me from? Joe.
Keep me from the recital of endless details. Give me wings to get to the point. Grant me the patience to listen to the complaints of others. Help me to endure them with charity. But seal my lips on my own aches and pains. They increase with the increasing years, and my inclination to recount them is also increasing.
Yes.
I will not ask thee for improved memory, only for a little more humility and less self-assurance when my own memory doesn't agree with that of others. Teach me the glorious lesson that occasionally I may be wrong.
Really? Who would lead us on then with keep me reasonably gentle? Somebody else?
Keep me reasonably gentle. I do not have the ambition to become a saint. It's so hard to live with some of them,
Well,
but a harsh old person is one of the devil's masterpieces. Make me sympathetic without being sentimental, helpful but not bossy. Let me discover merits where I have not expected them, from talents and people whom I had not thought to possess any. And Lord, give me the grace to tell them so.
What is the word of this is in the title?
anonymous abbess. Abbess is in charge of the convent. Yeah, or the abbey. Yeah, thank you. So, prayer of an anonymous abbess. At the Clare, we have Sister Jean, the rock star of our retirement community. And if you know or read her, you know she can embody a lot of this. She had a book signing just last week, right, Joe? Joe went to it, and I should have him tell you this, but you couldn't buy a book there. She wasn't selling books. She was signing books. And instead of saying, you want your Sister Jean, and no. With each person, Joe, help me here, she asked their name, and then she asked something important about them. Give us an example of what she
She
would.
asked each person, what did you do before you came to this retirement community?
Yeah.
Or several people wanted books addressed to a child or a grandchild or a friend. But in that case, I wanted a book addressed to my daughter in Connecticut. She said, so what did she do? Or does she do? And I said, well, she's a pillar of her Presbyterian church in Connecticut.
Here.
And a part-time hospital chaplain. So she wrote Lori, just first names only. Lori, Lori is my daughter's name. Thank you for all you do for people of faith.
Wow.
Sister Jean.
There's somebody who knows how to age gracefully. 102, I believe. Yeah. 103. God bless her. What a gift to us and Loyola University and a lot of other people. So let's move on to the video that I've been waiting to show all of you because it was such a huge hit at the Clare. And to introduce it, I'd like somebody to turn back to page 1 of our handout and read that first sentence, a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson. It is not length. Who'd read that?
It is not length of life, but depth of life.
So it's not length of life, but depth of life that matters the most. So it behooves us as we think about our own life, particularly in light of this video, about the values and virtues that for us contribute to the depth dimensions of life, of living fully and aging well. The speaker of this video, if you haven't seen it before, looks nothing like a university professor but that's what he is. He looks very much like a football player and a lineman, not a quarterback. He's got the what do you call that? Anyway, he's got a lot of it. And he talks about life lessons that he learned from someone whom the rest of us would probably not expect to learn much or expect much from. He talks about life lessons from a third grade dropout, or what does he say? The wisest person I have ever met in my life. And that's the way he starts out the video. Fred, roll it. Annette, roll it.
A third grade dropouts. Wisest and dropout in the same sentence is rather oxymoronic, like jumbo shrimp. Like fun run, ain't nothing fun about it. Like Microsoft Works, y'all don't hear me. I used to say like country music, but I've lived in Texas so long, I love country music now. I hunt, I fish, I have cowboy boots and cowboy, y'all, I'm a black-neck redneck. Do you hear what I'm saying to you? No longer oxymoronic for me to say country music. And it's not oxymoronic for me to say third grade and dropout. That third grade dropout, the wisest person I ever met in my life, who taught me to combine knowledge and wisdom to make an impact, was my father. A simple cook. Wisest man I ever met in my life. Just a simple cook. Left school in the third grade to help out on the family farm, but just because he left school doesn't mean his education stopped. Mark Twain once said, "I've never allowed my schooling to get in the way of my education." My father taught himself how to read, taught himself how to write, decided in the midst of Jim Crowism, as America was breathing the last gasp of the Civil War, my father decided he was going to stand and be a man. Not a black man, not a brown man, not a white man, but a man. He literally challenged himself to be the best that he could all the days of his life. I have 4 degrees. My brother is a judge. We're not the smartest ones in our family. It's a third grade dropout daddy. A third grade dropout daddy who was quoting Michelangelo, saying to us, "Boys, I won't have a problem if you aim high and miss, but I'm gonna have a real issue if you aim low and hit." A country mother quoting Henry Ford, saying, "If you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right." I learned that from a third grade drop. Simple lessons. Lessons like these. Son, you'd rather be an hour early than a minute late. We never knew what time it was in my house because the clocks were always ahead. My mother said for nearly 30 years, my father left the house at 3:45 in the morning. One day she asked him, "Why, Daddy?" He said, "Maybe one of my boys will catch me in the act of excellence. I want to share 2 things with you." Aristotle said, "You are what you repeatedly do." Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act. Don't ever forget that. I know you're tough, but always remember to be kind. Always. Don't ever forget that. Never embarrass mama. Yeah. If mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. If daddy ain't happy, don't nobody care. But you know, I'll tell you. Next lesson. Lesson from a cook over there in the galley. Son, make sure your servant's towel is bigger than your ego. Ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. Y'all might have a relative in mind you want to send that to. Let me say it again. Ego is the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. Pride is the burden of a foolish person. John Wooden coached basketball at UCLA for a living, but his calling was to impact people. And with all those national championships, guess what he was found doing in the middle of the week? Going into the cupboard, grabbing a broom, and sweeping his own gym floor. You want to make an impact? Find your broom. Every day of your life, you find your broom. You grow your influence that way. That way you're attracting people so that you can impact them. Final lesson. Son, if you're gonna do a job, do it right. I've always been told how average I can be. Always been criticized about being average. But I want to tell you something. I stand here before you before all of these people, not listening to those words, but telling myself every single day to shoot for the stars, to be the best that I can be. Good enough isn't good enough if it can be better, and better isn't good enough if it can be best. Let me close with a very personal story that I think will bring all this into focus. Wisdom will come to you in the unlikeliest of sources, a lot of times through failure. When you hit rock bottom, remember this: while you're struggling, rock bottom can also be a great foundation on which to build and on which to grow. I'm not worried that you'll be successful. I'm worried that you won't fail from time to time. The person that gets up off the canvas and keeps growing, that's the person that will continue to grow their influence. Back in the 70s, to help me make this point, let me introduce you to someone. I met the finest woman I'd ever met in my life. Back in my day, we'd have called her a brick house. This woman was the finest woman I'd ever seen in my life. There's just one little problem. Back then, ladies didn't like big old linemen. The Blind Side hadn't come out yet. They like quarterbacks and running backs. We're at this dance, and I find out her name is Trina Williams from Lompoc, California. And we're all dancing, and we're just excited. And I decide in the middle of dancing with her that I would ask her for her phone number. Trina was the first one. Trina was the only woman in college who gave me her real telephone number. The next day, we walked to Baskin & Robbins ice cream parlor. My friends couldn't believe it. This has been 40 years ago, and my friends still can't believe it. We go on a second date, and a third date, and a fourth date. We drive from Chico to Vallejo so that she could meet my parents. My father meets her. My daddy, my hero, he meets her, pulls me to the side and says, "Is she psycho?" But anyway, we go together for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. By now, Trina's a senior in college. I'm still a freshman, but I'm working some things out. I'm so glad I graduated in 4 terms. Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan. So now it's time to propose. So I talk to her girlfriends, and it's California, it's in the 70s, so it has to be outside. Have to have a candle, and you have to have, some chocolate. Listen, I'm from the hood. I had a bottle of Boone's Farm wine. That's what I had. She said yes. That was the key. I married the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen in my life. Y'all ever been to a wedding, and even before the wedding starts, you hear this? How in the world? And it was coming from my side of the family. We get married, we have a few children, our lives are great. One day, Trina finds a lump in her left breast. Breast cancer. 6 years after that diagnosis, me and my 2 little boys walked up to Mommy's casket. And for 2 years, my heart didn't beat. If it wasn't for my faith in God, I wouldn't be standing here today. If it wasn't for those 2 little boys, there'd have been no reason for which to go on. I was completely lost. That was rock bottom. You know what sustained me? The wisdom of a 3rd grade dropout. The wisdom of a simple cook. We're at the casket. I'd never seen my dad cry. But this time I saw my dad cry. That was his daughter. Trina was his daughter, not his daughter-in-law. And I'm right behind my father, about to see her for the last time on this earth. And my father shared 3 words with me that changed my life right there at the casket. It would be the last lesson he would ever teach me. He said, "Son, just stand. You keep standing. You keep standing, no matter how rough the sea, you keep standing." And I'm not talking about just water. You keep standing. No matter what, you don't give up. And as clearly as I'm talking to you today, these were some of her last words to me. She looked me in the eye and she said, "It doesn't matter to me any longer how long I live. What matters to me most is how I live." I ask y'all one question, a question that I was asked all my life by a 3rd grade dropout. How you living? How you living? Every day, ask yourself that question, how you living? Here's what a cook would suggest you to live this way. that you would not judge, that you would show up early, that you'd be kind, that you'd make sure that that servant's towel is huge and used, that if you're going to do something, you do it the right way. That cook would tell you this, that it's never wrong to do the right thing, that how you do anything is how you do everything. And in that way, you will grow your influence to make an impact. In that way, you will honor all those who have gone before you, who have invested in you. Look in those unlikeliest places for wisdom. Enhance your life every day by seeking that wisdom and asking yourself every night, how am I living? May God richly bless y'all. Thank you for having me.
That was great.
That was beautiful. Really good. That was beautiful.
I thought you'd like it.
I sure
What's his
did.
name? Profession now?
May I say something? I've written to several people in the group. I'm in the online, and I have several questions. If we ask a question, should we put it in chat, or should we just unmic ourselves? Is Meg there? Is Java there? I wrote to Fred.
Just do it in chat.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, my phone is on mute. I don't.
Okay, I tried to get through to someone. Thank you. I will do that.
Do you have a question or a comment?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. The main one being, how are you living each day? And that's a better question than saying or repeating, well, this is only how it is for today. That's more hopeful. That's one thing I got out of this. And of course, that it's what you do daily that builds your faith or lack thereof. And I'll be quiet now. It was a very good video.
Thank you. Other questions or comments, either from somebody in the room or somebody joining us online?
I just wanted to be reminded of his name and his current
Yeah.
profession.
Is it somewhere in this handout?
No, Dr. Rick Rigsby, I think he's a professor of sociology, and I don't know his institution. But what a speaker.
Not a minister?
No, not to my knowledge. Too bad. Of course, Martin Luther says we're a priesthood of all believers, aren't we? We all have our place and our gifts for ministry. Certainly he does. How are we living? How are we aging? God bless and keep us. Let's turn it over to Annette, or else she won't have any time for her share. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
What's the title of the book? Yeah, that you were. Thank you.
So I just want to kind of wrap us up, offer some questions and talk about some of the handouts in the back. So, and I know not everybody was able to join us each week, and that's totally fine. They are being recorded, and I'm guessing that Jana, who is our Director of Adult Ed here, will get those out in some way. If you would like the handouts, please email her, and I'll write that up on the board here in just a moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so she will electronically email those to you, the handouts, if you weren't able to be here in person. So I just want to remind us about where we started, right? So the very first day that we were together, I talked about some of those definitions. How do we view aging and spirituality? So I just want to remind you about those. So I had 5 for each, and I'll go through those fairly quickly. Now, I've been apparently on an Anglican kick lately, British, all things British. So I started with the Oxford Dictionary. And I just finished a wonderful book about the creation of that. So if you're interested, I'll talk to you after. But the Oxford definition of aging as a noun is simply the process of growing old. And from there, I went to the MSD manual, which is considered the best on Google. So it's on page 1 when you Google aging. Aging is a gradual, continuous process of natural change that begins in early adulthood. During early middle age, many bodily functions began to gradually decline. Now, ResearchGate, which is considered the most new definition of aging, begins with most evolutionary biologists define aging as an age-dependent or age-progressive decline in intrinsic physiological function, leading to an increase in age-specific mortality rate. Now, the World Health Organization describes aging at a biological level. Aging results from the impact of the accumulation of a wide variety of molecular and cellular damage over time, and this leads to a gradual decrease in physical and mental capacity, a growing risk of disease and untimely death. All such happy, wonderful things for a Sunday morning, aren't they? Right? And then MarketWatch, again, all these on the first page of Google, because who goes beyond that when they're searching, right? Aging reflects the relationship of time on our being. Aging describes in a large part the state of our body. Old, on the other hand, describes our state of mind. Look around you and you will see the role spirit and attitude play in relationship to the concept of growing old. So in other words, we're all aging, right? From the moment we are born, we are aging. None of us can escape it. You can spend as much money as you want on the creams and the treatments and all of that. Your body will age. We all have an expiration date. It is a matter of fact. And again, as the video said, as HD has shared, as I've shared, what matters is how we age, right? That's what makes the difference. That's what makes that quality that you hear so many people talk about. And then I went on to define spirituality. And again, going with the 5, because I like to be fair and even, starting with Oxford. The definition of spirituality, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. Now, the Royal College of Psychiatrists defines spirituality as this. It involves the recognition of a feeling or a sense of or belief that there is something greater than myself, something more to being human than sensory experience, and that the greater whole of which we are part is cosmic or divine in nature. The website Very Well Mind describes or defines spirituality as some signs of spirituality can include asking deep questions about topics such as suffering or what happens after death, deepening connections with other people, experiencing compassion and empathy for others. And then I went to the Presbyterians Today website, and Claudio Carvallis says, the work of the Holy Spirit is fundamental. Our lives are possible only by the movement of the Spirit in us. And we can worship only because we respond to God through the work of the Spirit in us. It's very much on point with Pastor Lucy's message this morning in her sermon. And finally, Andrews University, using a biblical context, defines spirituality in this way. Biblical spirituality can be defined as the process of the divine restoration and healing of the broken relation between the triune God and humanity. As such, biblical spirituality is the response of a repentant human heart and mind to the loving heart and mind of God. And they gather this from 1 Corinthians chapter 2, as well as Romans chapter 8, right? And so then one of the things that I often has perplexed me as I have grown in age and wisdom. I'd like to think wisdom. Some days I'm not so sure, but I'd like to think I've grown in wisdom. is when I hear people talk about faith and spirituality and religion as if they are one thing. Now, I do believe they are very, very similar, but they are not the same thing, right? Particularly if we look at faith and spirituality, first of all, they're like I said, they're similar. Faith is that knowing and believing. Faith is that innate sense we have in something greater. It's trust. It's how we live our lives. It's why we come to church, because we know, we trust that in that moment that we are worshiping then with people that share our same religion, we will be changed. We will grow. That's faith. It's that trust in something outside ourselves that allows us to grow, right? Faith is hard to describe. Faith involves a personal choice. It also involves shared beliefs, and it's a way that we shared experience and a way we live out our beliefs. Now, spirituality, hard to describe, right? I shouldn't say immediately. Often when I hear somebody say, I'm spiritual, but not religious, I go, oh, woo-woo, new age, oh, shaking your crystals, praying to trees. Now, I like to spend time with trees. There is an energy when I am in nature. There is an energy when I can sit here and see the lake and I can feel God's presence. Now, for some that sounds woo-woo, new agey, right? But I look out there and I'm like, what is this vast place that God has created for me? God didn't create it for God's self. God created it for us. And I want to rejoice in that and I want to honor that. That can be a spiritual practice of finding God in those moments in that nature. But again, it's hard to explain, isn't it? It's hard to explain. Spirituality is that connection with God or the divine or the universe. Spirituality provides us with the foundation for developing our values, distinguishing between right and wrong. But first and foremost, and our speaker mentioned in the video, sometimes you hit rock bottom, but that rock is a really good foundation. So spirituality is how we can create that foundation because it is our relationship with God. And spirituality helps us find our life's purpose, to inform what our purpose in life is. And please know, I'm not bashing religion. I'm not bashing church at all. I myself am ordained in the Episcopal Church. For me, that is a way I can express my spirituality and my faith is by worshiping together with people that share that faith. Because I know for me, as a spiritual person, I do not move or live in this world by myself. And I need to feel connected to other people in some way. And I can do that on a Sunday morning. As we share that moment of faith, as we share our belief, our trust in God. And in my tradition, we have Eucharist or communion every Sunday. And so we come together to share in that great gift from God. And that is one way I express my spirituality. That is one way I live out my faith. But that is not religion. That is not church. Church is an institution. Church is a place where we can come together and do that safely. That doesn't mean there's not faith in the church, because there is, right, in the building. But church isn't just the building either. Religion is a denomination. Religion is a way, a prescribed way that we can share that communal faith. Okay? I'm not saying there's not spirituality and faith in religion, because there is, but when we think of them just in pure terms of language, they are different. And again, totally how it should be, right? So we also talked about ways that we might express our spirituality. And again, keep in mind that definition is creating that stronger connection, relationship with our God. And we do that personally first, right? I do, and I can't remember where I stuck the bulletin here, but one of the things, that we share in worship here is we do the prayer of confession, that communal time. Because we're not perfect beings, are we? There are times when we don't love as we should. Times we don't care for the other as we should. Sometimes we don't care for ourselves as we should. Each one of us are made in the image and likeness of God. Each one of us is a beloved child of God. And we need to know that in ourselves. And we need to open up our hearts. I love how you said that, HD, that heart, because the suffering heart breaks open, doesn't dissolve. It breaks open and makes way for joy and peace and the love of God to come in, right? That is that act of faith, opening up our hearts to what God has for us, to what the Holy Spirit wants us to understand. And all of that will happen in God's time. And God's always right there. I've never in my life, and I've not had a perfect life, but it's been very blessed. I've had a car repossessed. I've had a home repossessed. I was homeless. I was jobless. Okay. Lots of addictions in my family. Raised with an alcoholic father. Right? It's not been perfect, but I have known since I was 4 years old that I am never alone. Because when I woke up on my 4th birthday and the headboard of my bed faced the east window, and it was a large window like this, and that sun came down that morning, and I felt the power and love of God surround me. And I knew from that moment, like a voice I heard in my head, you will never be alone. You will never be alone if you listen for God. So I know that God is with me. Now, how I have to create those moments myself, right? To find the time for God, you're never going to find the time, let's be honest. We all know that, right? We all know we cannot manage time, no matter what we do. In 5 minutes, it's going to be 5 after 12, no matter what we do. But what we do is choose how to live those 5 minutes. And so choosing how I'm going to create that relationship with God is a choice I have to make every day. I have to make the time to do that. And yes, sometimes I put it in my calendar. Sometimes I put it on my phone. I'll set an alarm. Take time to meditate today. Take time to do centering prayer today. Take time to do this. And I put it in there. And I don't ignore it. So as we age, as we live our lives, how do we want to live today? How are we living today? I've shared a little bit, again, my own spirituality, some of my practices. This is an Anglican rosary. I don't know how well they can see it. And I've shared with that. You've probably seen the Catholic rosary, right? So that's, you asked me the bead count. The Catholic one, which is all the 10 decades, as it's called, was a way when it originally started that they would say every single psalm every day, right? So we know there's 150 psalms. So I believe there's about 155 beads in the Catholic rosary. So an Anglican rosary has 33 beads, representing the 33 years of Christ's life. Okay, and it's divided a little bit differently. So on the back table, I do have some resources for you. Please take them. Again, those of you online, if you will email Jana, she will get those to you. And it's actually, for those online, I'm going to say it because it'll show up in the recording. It's adult education, one word, at fourthchurch.org. And I'll write it up on here as well. So in the back, I have my business cards. I am the director of the Center for Life and Learning here, which is a program for people 16 and older. If you're not old enough to be in that, It's okay. I don't check your IDs. So please check us out on the Fourth website and join us for our programs. But I did include, I know we talked a little bit last week about grief. Because we know in our culture, we do not have the words. We are not comfortable with talking about death and dying and grief. And again, our video, he did such a wonderful job of sharing that story about his wife, right? So we have, there's a woman who is a death doula. She's here locally. I've gotten to know her very well. She's presented for us. So I have a little half sheet. She's going to be coming in June, doing a 3-part series for us about grief processing. Okay. You do not have to be a member to come. There is information available on the back table there. And again, my business cards, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I've also included a bibliography. It's a 1-page. It'll be on the back of the grief piece. 1-page bibliography of just some readings that you might be interested in, some books. This was put together by Susan Quaintance, who was the director just prior to myself. She has been coming back this year doing some teaching for us. And so she has a compilation of things that she's read about aging and quality of life and creating that. I've also linked, I've alluded to this a little bit, a lot of studies going on right now about aging and spirituality as you age, the importance of that in having a more positive outlook, helping with physical healing, and just making people a little bit more resilient as they age, as they face some of those declining issues. So I just have gone through some websites that I found very helpful, and that's back there as well. And I also included then finally some resources by Richard Rohr. He does have a daily meditation page. If you're interested, I know the Jesuit brothers from Ireland have a wonderful page. I know there are some others that have those if you're looking for daily reflection. If you're not part of the Fourth Church email system, they also do a daily reflection every day. That is very helpful. If you are interested in the Anglican Rosary or prayer beads in general, I also included information about that. One of which, and I kind of told you a little bit here about what they're like, but this is a full, you can see it's kind of thick. It's got 22 pages, which is a very detailed account of how to pray the Anglican Rosary, but you could use it with any type of prayer beads. So again, that is all back there for you for your information, or we can send it to you. So what are your thoughts? What are you thinking? What questions do you still have? Oh, here we go. Oh, okay, Beth has put it up there. She did find some about Rick Rigsby. He's a professor at Texas A&M and now is the CEO of Rick Rigsby Communications. That makes sense.
I have a question for you, Annette. The early part started with, can't remember exactly how you said it, but you used the words, what happens after we die?
Mm-hmm.
Is there thinking, have people pontificated about that? I mean, nobody can really know, right?
Right. So
some magic that I'm not aware of.
Right. So the question for those of you online, if you weren't able to hear it very well, the question is, I had brought up or had said, what happens after we die? So that's what was the question. So what does happen? Is there research? There is not conclusive scientific research. And there is still a lot of stipulation. And the honest truth is we just don't know. And so again, please know this is my perspective. I'm not speaking on behalf of the Episcopal Church or the Presbyterian Church. This is my personal opinion. I do believe in a God. I do believe there is God. I do believe there is this divine entity called the Holy Spirit. I believe that Jesus Christ is God's Son. And I believe that I am called to live my life in a certain way. And I'm going to do whatever I can to live that life. And I know I'm going to make mistakes. And I'm going to do what I can to repent and repair that relationship. So I am not afraid to die. There are things I'd still like to do with my life. I think I mentioned I have a new grandchild, my first, coming in August. I would love to be here to see that grandchild and know that grandchild and see that grandchild go. But if that should not be, if my expiration date happens before I see that child, so be it. I also trust that God is with all of my family. Right? And so I know it can be a scary thing. It's the unknown. It's the not knowing, I think, for some of us. So again, I'll just mention Catherine is the death doula I work with. There are other death doulas here in Chicago. I just happen to have built a relationship with Catherine, and she's the one that's worked with us at the CLL. So I can speak most about her work. She is not a therapist. Her job as a death doula is to walk with the person who is dying and their family to make that process as normal and natural and comfortable as it can be. So again, if you have questions, if there's a concern, talk to your pastoral staff here. They are just wonderful people to sit with and listen to. Perhaps you want to talk with a death doula. Catherine offers some weekly conversations. And again, it's just, for me, and I worked as a hospice chaplain, I don't fear dying and death. I'd like it to be quick. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, I don't know. But I'm comfortable talking about it. And I think for me, that's made it easier to be like, I don't know what's going to happen next, but I know it's all going to be okay. But that's me. Okay. And that is not something I've come to easily. Let me just tell you that. I have not come to that conclusion easily. Right. And again, personal experience, decisions I've made in my life that have literally thrown me to the rock bottom. And literally by the grace of God, I am standing here today. And that is I hate to be cliche, but that is gospel truth. If it had not been for the grace of God, I would have died in 2008. Okay, but that is not our discussion today. I'm just, again, sharing with you how powerful I know God and the Spirit works. Thank you for your question. Other questions? Annette's waving at me. What you got, Annette?
Well, I just want to say that this business of dying is very complicated and depends on the person, and it particularly depends on how they age physically. For instance, I would never raise my hand to suffer a lot and have to take morphine before I die. I'm not that great. And I also understand that we can't know what it's like for someone else to die. And this is really important. We die alone. I don't care how many husbands you have or mates or whatever. This is a solo act. And because we do that, I think it brings in a lot of other reasonable fears. Will I have enough money? Where will I be or go at the very end? And it's good to work on this, starting in your 70s, but not everybody gets to it. And asking people what they want. Like, I've tried to talk to my sister a little bit about this. Just forget it, okay? She thinks I'm going to live forever, I guess. And so it's fraught with a lot of anxiety and sometimes depression.
Yes, you are right on all cases. And I'm not going to argue with you, but I'm just going to tell you from my personal experience, at that moment of death, we are literally not alone. I have sat with people literally as they're taking their last breath, and they are seeing someone who is not physically in that room, and they are totally comforted by what is next.
That isn't what I meant by dying alone, okay? I mean, the person sitting with you is not going to die. you are. And
Right, but I'm saying, Annette, let's talk about this another time. I hate to cut you off, but we are at time, so I'm happy to talk with you more about this. I do, yeah, there are. And I do want to honor everyone's time, but I do want to, yes, take a moment. Just take a breath. Just breathe in that gentle, loving grace of God. Release the things that you don't need right now. Let's take one more breath in and out. And you know, 3's the magic number. And let us pray. God, be in my head and in my understanding. God, be in my eyes and in my looking. God, be in my mouth and in my speaking. God, be in my heart and in my thinking. God, be at my end and in my departing. Amen. Go in peace. I pray you have a blessed day, a blessed week, and I hope our paths will cross again.
Thank you so much. Thank you
You're welcome. Thank you. Night, everyone online.